Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast, a conversation aimed at understanding all sides of mental health, addiction recovery, and homelessness. Each interview will include one's personal experiences and insights, or an expert's advice and knowledge within one of these fields. The goal is to promote awareness, guidance, and support for anyone who is affected by these challenges. Thank you all for listening. Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, Brendan.cutuli, and we are here today for Season 2, Episode number 20 with Kim Norwood. Kim is a licensed professional clinical counselor who serves clients in Ohio, and Kim provides online activities and reflections in order to effectively teach children valuable life skills. And this is through her work at canbetherapy.com. Kim joins the Mental Insights podcast to speak about the impact of our childhood years and family dynamics within our own mental health. So, Kim, thank you for taking this time to be here today on the Mental Insights podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited today.
I think it'll be a wonderful conversation as these are two really prevalent issues that people I'm sure are experiencing, right at this moment. And within this first part of the episode, we're going to speak about how childhood years play a drastic impact in terms of our mental health. And before we really dive deep into it, to give a more brief introduction about the work that you do, can you explain more about Can Be Therapy and what really brought you to make this step within the mental health field?
So, Can Be Therapy Solutions is basically a program where you can log in and you can watch like a really short little video that I put on there, usually about 2 minutes. And then after you watch that video of a lesson that I teach you, you can complete the activity and it helps you move towards more of a mental wellness. So it's kind of like a little addition to therapy. So, when you go see your therapist, you can speak and talk to them, but there's usually time in between and you're like, what do I do about this? What do I do about that? So the program from Can Be Therapy Solutions really helps fill in that gap. And so it just provides just a little bit of extra help to get you to the next point. So I developed the program because I had a lot of clients, like my practice in Ohio, it's very hard to get people in before every 2 weeks, sometimes monthly, just depending on what's going on. And so people have always been like, oh, I need an extra session, or I've had people who can't afford to come very often. And so that just sort of birthed Can Be Therapy Solutions and allowed people to just sort of have a little bit of extra so that they can get to the next session without completely just laying there and waiting till the next session. So gives a little bit of extra time, a buffer for me more so, but I think it would help everybody if they could just say, oh, I remember hearing about this. Let me go get this concept. It makes me feel better. And when I get to my therapist, we can talk about all these different things. So it kind of serves as like a little Band-Aid to help you get there. So
It's certainly a much needed one because people definitely often struggle before and in between therapy sessions of doing that work, and sometimes something as simple as having this reminder of, all right, I can go here and do a quick activity can be that help in order for you to sustain that growth between sessions, rather than some people may take a few steps back and turn, and that's, I think, the challenges that we all have today in working through those therapeutic sessions. So to really jump into things in terms of our childhood years, what challenges are we seeing today in terms of children and what they face within mental health? And, speak about what ages are we really seeing these challenges?
okay. With kids, what I found is a lot of children are starting to struggle mentally around 8 and 9 years old. And I think with the addition of a lot of our social medias and expectations we put on kids at that age, they're really starting to react in phases probably 4 years sooner than what they would normally react. The behavior an 8-year-old has is totally different from what we would expect. We would want them to be maybe on a 12-year-old's phase. So if you can think back to middle school, what it was like being 12 and having all these hormones and looking at everybody around you and wanting your body to look like this and wondering why those people like people, and just all the things that happen in that middle school phase. A lot of 8-year-olds are now having those problems. So they're getting it from social media, and then the fact that we are expecting them to learn concepts quicker than we've ever expected kids to learn, and the fact that they can't ever get away from toxic things. So before, like, let's say you had a bully at school. Once you had that bully, you knew once you ran home, the situation's over. You got however many hours to get prepared for the next day. Now you have that bully at school. They find you on social media, they're on the video game, they're messaging you on TikTok, they're sending you crazy Snapchats. Like, the kids cannot really get away from it. So they're not able to develop in the same ways that other kids were able to do when they were 12 years old. So we're starting to see huge effects happen at 8 and 9 years old that we expect at 12 and 13. It's a very big differences.
Absolutely. It poses such a big challenge. And, I was kind of in the mix of when technology was coming to play, but I saw like a little bit of how it can be, a play in terms of when you're taking it home. And it could be such a substantial effect of having that much of a means of communication with other people besides, going home to your family and having that communication, that different aspect of someone and some people that you can look up to and be there of some sort of support system. And how really vital is, transparent communication between a child and an adult. So when that child goes home, what can an adult do to, support that child and try to help them alleviate some of that stress and that angst that the child may be going through of having them pulled in all those different directions?
Well, it is super vital to have full communication with kids at these ages, whether it's mom, dad, aunt, uncle, friend, whoever it is. Like, as soon as they walk in the house, one thing I always tell parents is meet them at the door, have conversations. What happened today? Well, so and so, ate my sandwich. What'd you do when they ate your sandwich? Just really kind of giving them the skills that they need through open conversation. Or if they're like, oh, I came home and nothing happened today. Well, something had to happen today. Like, somebody had to look at you crazy. Somebody had to make a fart noise in the lunchroom. Somebody had to do something, and just really have that open communication and expressing your own stories really helps kids. So if you in middle school had a situation where somebody stepped on your favorite shoes and you got really upset, but you figured out how to clean it up and tell them, don't step on my feet again, that helps a kid. And just being very honest, like, I understand, I went through situations too, here's how I handled it. That's the best way we can really get these kids to be open and communicate and not look for, very maladaptive patterns. We want them to really just be open and understand we all go through things. So
Wonderful. And, through these means of communication, I think some parents certainly struggle in terms of speaking to this is the answer and this is how you should be. And then in relation to how you can be supportive in terms of allowing the child to understand why they feel a certain way and how they can overcome it. Within children of those ages, I believe, emotions and managing as well as just identifying what emotions they come into play is such a challenge for children of that age, and why therapy for them is a good means of kind of analysis, because some parents don't know how to open that up. So what are some activities that a parent could help, or even some questions that they could have to help a child identify and manage their emotions a little bit better once they come home from a school setting?
So there's a couple different ways you can do that. One way is you can have the same questions. So the kids can kind of pre-think about it as they're on their way home. Oh my goodness, they're going to ask me, what did I eat today? They're going to ask me who was crazy on the playground today. They're going to ask me, was my teacher terrible today? So having those same questions that you ask really preps the kid before they even walk in the door. So that's one way. Another way is kind of using scenarios in movies. Like I always joke and have the kids see Napoleon Dynamite and just like how he reacts, you know, when the guy like takes his tots, and just to make it fun and funny and just explain that, hey, everybody goes through this. And so if you don't have the words as a parent, like you can pull out all kinds of clips, you know, those classic Mean Girls and things like that, and just say, okay, so you see how this happened in this situation? This is what's happening to you. And then just laugh with the kid, and the kid say, oh, well, I guess I can just say no. So using illustrations of things around them will really help, and making things funny and light that they can connect to you as well is huge, you know. So I usually suggest those without having to get too therapeutic for people. It's things they can get to pretty quickly. So
Absolutely. It's definitely there's a different environment for each way, but in terms of the parental role, there can be some of these means just to allow your child to open up a little bit more. And when a parent doesn't do this, when they don't meet the needs of their child, when they don't provide some coping mechanisms for their child to handle these emotions, this can translate to other troubles down the line. So what kind of challenges can come into place with someone's life if a parent, if a therapist, if basically someone is not able to support a child's needs and meet some of the emotions at a base level during those years? What can that translate to later down the line and a child eventually becoming an adult?
well, and it translates to so many things, as far as like the kid can become super depressed because they start to internalize everything. They think they're terrible. Everything around me is terrible. There's nothing else I can look forward to. And then you seep into deep depressions, and we don't want that. Another thing that can happen is they become highly anxious. Like they can't really go out and do things. They're afraid to interact with people. They don't have the skills to just talk to somebody in the grocery store. That's a huge problem that we're having with people nowadays. Like people can't even say, oh, here's my money for what I bought. And it just blows a lot of people's mind. Like there are people like that. So that's something that happens. Then you can go into drug issues, anger management problems. They get into abusive situations or they become abusers. And so it's so important to catch them at that young age and give them the tools, because if we skip out on giving them the tools, kids that have a really hard time start when they're 14. And when they stand on that line at 14 and make a decision of whether they're going to go down this road or they're going to go down that road, not having the skills really leads them down the difficult path. And so we try to intervene and do that as soon as possible to help them out.
Absolutely. It shows why, we need this education and the resources at the youngest level possible, because we don't necessarily know when a child experiences some of these challenges. And for many people now who are sharing their stories, it can be as early as 4 and 5. And how are we able to meet those needs at, the base level? And it's trying to infiltrate, trying to provide those support systems at the earliest age. And as well, we're seeing this especially time now where maybe people don't have the availability to get these resources initially. A lot of people today can't afford therapeutic services now. And with that trouble, what are some, skills or activities that family or even a parental guardian could really help translate to, educate and support a child who is struggling at this time?
They can do what I tell everybody: water. Water is your main coping skill. It's available to us. We can get water. First thing you want to do is when you notice a kid's elevating and they're getting upset, ask them to go wash their hands. A lot of times that brings kids all the way down and they'll start speaking. So something so simple as water. Another thing is coloring with them. Have them color and say, okay, you can draw anything. And I don't care if it's the craziest picture. I've had kids who've drawn pictures of planes dropping bombs on someone's head and then it's exploding, and people are like, oh my gosh, how do you have them draw that picture? But it gets out what's inside of them. And so you can kind of get more of a line of, oh my gosh, my kid's struggling. Maybe I should spend more time with them. So that's huge. Another thing you can really reach out and get is just any kind of tactile things. So I tell people, even having them hold bags of rice while you guys play red light, green light, huge to help them, allowing them to stand in a little baby pool and just say, okay, now I want you to have one leg up, one leg down, and just getting them to tune into other parts of their brain really helps teach them how to relax themselves. So if they're in a classroom and they're standing there and the teacher's screaming at them and they want to explode, they can realize, like, let me lift one foot up. Oh, that feels good. Let me lift the other foot up. And they completely calm themselves and distract themselves. So just little things you can do at home can really help this therapeutic process along. So instead of having to pay a therapist $120 that you don't have, you can just try out these little bitty skills and it will really help bring your kid down. And then if you're talking to them every day, you really can start to, as a parent, bring those behaviors together. So
Wonderful. I think those are all great things. And, it's definitely at an initial level, there's a lot that parents, that guardians can do in order to really help and calm and ease their child through whatever kind of emotions and, you know, whatever they're feeling at that current moment. But, as we're saying, there can be some things underneath at a hidden level that maybe a parent can't really get to, which is why therapeutic services are so needed. And which is why the trouble of how it's so hard for people to really get that support within, people who are struggling that we even know about. I think some of the numbers are about like 50% aren't even able to get the treatment. And, within your experience, within what's really transpiring today, what are ways in which we could try to, break that barrier and try to provide more resources and support for people within the mental health field and specifically within children today?
one thing I would say is just sort of support your schools. Like there are a lot of programs where they are hiring therapists to go into a school and service those kids who can't get therapeutic services. So when your school district brings that up, really push and try to help with that. Because around here in Ohio, we have a lot of districts that are a lot poorer than other parts of the country because Ohio has a lot of country. And so we implant therapists in those schools, and it comes from, grants, and it comes from the county services. So you can link up with your Adamus board, and your Adamus board can funnel the money to these therapists who pull the kids out of class and actually give them all the tools that the parents can't give them. So that's one way. You can also contact different Adamus boards and they'll tell you like, oh, this therapeutic place offers, 20-minute sessions or 30-minute sessions complimentary, and really reach out to those people. That helps out a lot. And so there's all these different ways that you can connect with therapists. And especially like my Can Be program, that's why I even developed it, because I had people who would come for 2 or 3 sessions and their kids really needed 20 and they couldn't afford to pay for all of them. So I would just end up handing out like activities like, okay, I created this activity. Here's the way you can follow it. Here's the steps to it. Take it home and really go through it with your kid, and there's a lot of other resources on Pinterest and things like that. But really going out and connecting with your Adamus board can really, put you in the right places to get that help if people can't afford it. So.
It's great to hear. There's definitely opportunities out there. It's obviously within different communities, we need to take that initiative and try to provide some of those more resources out there because, as I've spoken with some people before, when you look at school for children, there's a lot of PE courses, there's a lot of physical education, but we never have this aspect of teaching kids about their emotions, about what they're going through, how they can understand what's going through in their mind. And You'd think that'd be a valuable tool to teach children with what they experience.
You would, and I feel like that has been my fight the last 10 years. I do a lot of work with school systems as well, and just kind of come in and set things up, and people can go forward and carry it out. And that's one thing I've always talked to the schools about, like, why can't you take 5 minutes once a week and say, okay, Johnny was running and he scraped his knee on the ground and got up and kicked dirt in everybody's face, but then the teacher came over and said, why don't we all take deep breaths together? Like, why don't we just institute that into schools? And so my hope at one point someday that will be a part of the curriculum. Like, every kid will do that. I know there's a lot of programs that are going in and putting yoga into a lot of behavioral schools. So the kids who can't function in a regular school system, they're bringing in yoga and all these things, and they're testing it out, and they're finding out kids are doing so much better learning yoga at 8 and being able to control themselves. So my hope is one day all of this will be every kid, not just this small section of kids who can't function in society, but every kid will have these skills and can use them in their life. So
I love to hear that, and it's going to be a great transition within the next episode of this conversation, because we'll speak a little bit more at the end of the episode about what your truly hopes are for the future and what you hope to do in terms of continuing this change that you're making within the mental health field. So please be sure to look for that. But for now, Kim, I want to thank you for taking this time for part one of this episode, where we spoke about really trying to navigate what children face at a developmental level throughout their childhood years. And we'll be speaking in the next part about family dynamics and how that has a big part in terms of one's own mental health. So thank you all for listening, and thank you, Kim, for taking this time. This was part one of episode number 20.
thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And everybody be sure to tune in to the next episode, which will be released in 2 days. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Mental Insights Podcast. Make sure to reach out to today's guest or myself if you need any advice, guidance, or support in your life today. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and review to this podcast so we know what you thought of this episode. I look forward to being in touch with you all in the next episode. I hope you all have a wonderful day.